released. Shout out to NBC News.
Don't kill your dog.
Oh, hey, Dr. Marty.
Hey, back.
But what's wrong with this?
Has to make public. So that would be anything that is related to what we now know, Pam Bondi opening up an investigation earlier in September relating to ties between some Democrats and Jeffrey Epstein. So they have 15 days after the release of these documents. The Department of Justice has to say why and basically set forth a justification for materials that were not disclosed because they fall into that loophole in the law. So that's some of what we might not see as we work our way through this tremendously voluminous amount of information.
Ms. DeMaris, thank you so much. Please stand by. I do want to go to Congressman James Walkinshaw. He is on the House Oversight Committee. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. Understanding that our team of reporters all across the globe, just starting to pick through these documents that are now being released for the first time after this immense pressure campaign to see this day come to pass. What are your early takeaways from this release today?
Well, thanks for having me. And first, I want to credit the courageous survivors. You know, without their voices, we would not be at this point today where we're starting to get some transparency. It's enormously frustrating that the law is clear, the files in full were supposed to be released today, and the Trump administration is not in compliance with that law. So that's very frustrating. That notwithstanding, our team, House Democrats, Oversight Democrats team, we're going to be going through what has been released to determine what is there and what might be missing so that our investigation can proceed.
If you're on YouTube,
You say that DOJ is not in compliance with the law, and yet we did hear Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche say there are hundreds of thousands of documents that are going to be released over the course of 2 weeks.
no, they released all of
To
them.
wait until the conclusion of that time to make that
The
firm
DOJ
statement.
had no
Has it not
choice
been compliant, or are
but
you
to
certain
release
at
all
this
of
very
them.
moment that there has been non-compliance?
Well, the law is clear that the files in full are supposed to have been released. If the Department of Justice felt like they weren't on track to meet that legal deadline, they should have communicated that to Congress days or weeks ago. They've had 30 days to redact what needed to be redacted from the files and release them in full to the public. So they have not followed the law. We're going to explore all of our legal options to make sure that the complete files with obviously information related to victims and survivors redacted comes to light.
Let me follow up with you on that. Can you be more specific? What exact recourse or actions are you prepared to take to bring DOJ fully in compliance?
We're having those conversations now. Ranking members Garcia and Raskin from the Judiciary Committee's released a statement that they're consulting with our counsel to determine what the legal options could be, consulting with the legal representation for the survivors, but we're going to pursue every possible remedy. I have additional information for you right now in terms of exactly what that will be.
And talk about the significance of this day, understanding that Congressman Ro Khanna, who's one of the lawmakers who led the charge to see this day come to pass, has put out a statement saying he's disappointed that the documents are not being released in full. But talk about the significance of the fact that there is this large tranche that is starting to be released. It's something that lawmakers, but also the survivors have called for.
I think it's incredibly significant, and it's significant because it's one of the very few instances that Republicans in Congress have found their backbone and stood up to Donald Trump. They resisted it for a long time, but you know, it's important to remember President Trump has done everything in his power to block these files from being released. He tried to browbeat Republican members of Congress to remove their name from the discharge petition. He was actively lobbying against the discharge petition and the vote before it was held until he realized that he was going to lose. So he's tried everything in his power to block it, and in Congress, in a rare instance, in this particular Congress, stood up to him and said, the American people want to see these files, the American people deserve transparency, and the survivors especially deserve accountability for those involved in the crimes committed.
And I've just gotten this statement from Congressman Khanna. Let me read it to you, Congressman. I'll get your reaction on the other side. He says, I have to say that the release has been disappointing from the initial read of it, but I reserve judgment until we go through all of the release. Again, what I'm calling for in terms of a constructive next step is for Todd Blanchard or Pam Bondi to get in front of the country to share the timeline for the full release. If they were to do that, would that satisfy
That's
what
not-
you are calling for, Congress?
I thought it
That's
was.
a necessary step, and it's not what I'm calling for. It's what the law that President Trump signed calls for, which is for the files to be released today. So, yes, at a minimum, they need to come before the country and Congress and explain why they haven't released the full files today and lay out the timeline moving forward. I hope a rapid timeline for the American people to get the transparency that they want here.
And Congressman, as you start to go through these files, what specifically are you looking for?
Well, I think for me, and I think for most people across the country, we want to know who, if anyone, who maybe hasn't been yet implicated, was involved in Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. Who were the accomplices who helped him to commit these crimes? Who perhaps knew that these crimes were taking place and didn't go to the authorities at the time? I think those are all really, really important questions. But this is a story of, rich and powerful men raping and abusing young girls and women, and we need to get the full truth. Everyone who knew about it, everyone who was involved, everyone who might have helped it happen.
And Congressman, just finally, once the files are released, what do you anticipate happens next?
Well, on the Oversight Committee, our investigation is ongoing, and it's also worth noting, even separate from the legislation requiring the release of the files, we have an active subpoena with both the Department of Justice for them to turn over the files to the Oversight Committee and to the Epstein estate for them to continue turning over files. And our philosophy is we're going to follow the investigation wherever it leads. I'm not prejudging where that investigation will lead, but we need to get all of the information and follow the investigation wherever it leads.
All right, Congressman James Walkinshaw, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
I want to go back to Ryan Nobles on Capitol Hill. Ryan, just get your reaction to what we just heard from the congressman who very clearly stated he's not satisfied by the release so far because it is not, he says, in compliance with what the law has ordered the Justice Department to do. Are we going to see a big battle?
Yeah, that's the vibe you're getting right now,
Yeah.
particularly from Democrats in Congress, Kristen. You heard from Congressman Walkinshaw his concerns with what has not been released yet, and we also were just listening in to a press call that Congressman Ro Khanna was holding. That's part of what you were reading that transcript from. And if I can get a little bit further into some of the points that Khanna was making, he wants not only all the files to be released, which the Department of Justice has said could take up to 2 weeks, but he also wants explanations for why things were redacted. So if there's a page that is just completely black, or if there's a name that has been redacted, he believes that the Department of Justice needs to come to Congress and explain that, even if it has to be in a classified setting, because there needs to be some level of accountability as it relates to those redactions. The consequences, because I think that's a big question we keep coming back to. The Department of Justice is not going to sue itself or not prosecute itself for not doing the proper compliance with Congress. Who then offers up those consequences? And Khanna went into a number of different examples as to what options Congress has at their disposal. There is, first of all, the opportunity for lawsuits to be filed. Those lawsuits could come from the survivors, which we've already seen a degree of moxie from them to take on the powerful interests that are connected to Epstein. So there's that stage. There could also be a group of independent journalists. I mean, our news organization, for instance, could sue and claim that this law exists and we are members of the public and we should have access to those files. And a judge could say, show me all the files, and those files need to be released. But then he said this, which I thought was interesting, that the Congress could ultimately hold impeachment hearings for Pam Bondi or Todd Blanche if they are not being compliant enough. And the first point to make right now is Republicans are in charge of the committees that would hold impeachment hearings along those lines. And there's just no way they would take that step. We have an election coming up in about 10 months. And so there is the possibility, 12 months, there is the possibility that if Democrats were to gain back control, and Kristen, there's a world where they could be back in control this time next year, if there is still a sense that they're not being fully compliant, the Democrats would have the opportunity and the power to take those steps. So there is a lot here that you almost kind of see a carrot and stick kind of tactic being held by members of this information, and they want to make it clear there are options at their disposal to enforce that. And I would say, just the last point I'd make about it in terms of why these members of Congress are initially unhappy with it, it is A, the level of redactions, B, the fact that they, at the first glance, have not been able to really get into some of the things that the survivors were specifically looking for. But I can't emphasize enough the fact that that searchable database is not working. That was a key part of the law that they wrote, that you be able to go in there, type in a name, and kick out every single file where that name exists. And right now that function is returning nothing. So I think that's important too, Kristen.
That is hugely significant, and as soon as these files had started to be released, Ryan, it's something that you noted, the fact that here we are at the end of the hour, it is still a problem, hugely significant. Ryan Nobles, thank you so much for all of your reporting throughout the hour. Tom Winter, let me go back to you. You have learned a little bit more. What do you have?
Yeah, Kristen, so I'm going to show you something on our screen right now, and it's a note that I just put in. Our controller doesn't have a prayer of getting this up to show you full screen, but just to give you a sense of what we're looking at, this comes from an FBI file that's included in here, and this appears to be new to me. In March of 2011, there's a request here for 2 FBI agents to travel to Sydney, Australia, to conduct an interview that was approved by the Criminal Investigative Unit of the FBI, CID, and the Crimes Against Children Unit. It appears to have been a squad supervisor out of Palm Beach County, so that's somebody who oversees a particular squad of FBI agents, and they wanted to conduct an interview apparently in connection with the ongoing investigation of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Why that date could be potentially significant is clear that the FBI did not let go of the matter once Jeffrey Epstein was prosecuted in Florida and signed that non-prosecution agreement. They were clearly had their ears open to new information and wanted to travel to Australia. Now, the name of the person who they wanted to talk to is redacted. If it was a potential victim, I wouldn't have shown you the document anyway. But it is interesting to note that the FBI appears to have still been on the case, at least as far back as March of 2011, and that's several years after Epstein had already signed that non-prosecution agreement. So we'll see if there's some more information that's contained here. We might know who that specific individual is as well, so we'll continue to do a little bit more reporting. But it did stick out to me that the FBI definitely was in the process. This trip appears to have been approved, and that it actually happened, and that the FBI was still continuing this investigation again after Epstein signed that non-prosecution agreement. I'll mention alongside this, that the FBI did want Epstein charged and was prepared to charge him on complaint prior to the U.S. Attorney's Office signing off on it. They were ready to go when he returned from the U.S. Virgin Islands. In the middle of their investigation, they felt they had enough and were told to stand back down by the U.S. Attorney's Office. Then U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta overseeing it. Of course, he became Trump's Department of Labor Secretary during Trump's first term and resigned as a result of some of the revelations that came out in the 2019-2020 time period, Kristen.
Well, just a few of the critical nuggets that we are learning there. Tom Winter, thank you for your excellent reporting. We'll let you continue to keep reading. Kelly O'Donnell, let me go back to you as we continue to pour through these documents. What will you be watching for as we head into this evening? Well, again, to give people some framework here, we have learned through the documents that have been produced today, including a letter from Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche to Congress, that 200 Department of Justice lawyers participated in this review, 187 of them from the National Security Division, and then a second group, 25 lawyers, did a review of the reviewed materials with a special view of looking for victim information and to make certain that there was protection of those victims. So that's part of the process being explained. We've also learned that in recent weeks, there have been judges' rulings about grand jury information being releasable. That typically does not happen even when a case goes to court and is prosecuted to an outcome. Typically, grand jury material is secret. In light of all of this context, there have been some rulings allowing for that. And so they acknowledge here that there's additional information that is being reviewed because that came to light or came to the awareness or access to it became available to the Department of Justice later in the process. So that explains part of why, at least according to the Department of Justice, why there may be more material coming out in the time ahead. There's also a category of things that they can choose to exclude. And some of that includes what you might commonly think of as privileges. We know about an attorney-client privilege. What you say to a lawyer who represents you is kind of a sacred space that can't be made public. But there are other kinds of privileges. They include work product. So lawyers working amongst themselves, that could be interesting. Deliberative discussions. And I raise that because it does open the door to, might there have been documents, communications, internal records that deal with some of the decision-making process with respect to Epstein that might be held back. Kristen?
Kelly O'Donnell, thank you for being with us for the hour to pour through these documents as they come in, and all of our team of reporters are being with us throughout the hour. We will be back Monday with more Meet the Press Now. And if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press on your local NBC News stations. I'll have exclusive interviews with Senators Lindsey Graham and Tim Kaine. Don't miss it. We're going to have continuing coverage of this breaking news on NBC News Now.
Top of the hour here on News Now. We come on the air.
Okay, and that's it. See y'all later.
Following, I'm Tom Costello for Hallie Jackson.